Welcome everyone to our Utilities webinar, Weather Risk Innovation, Weather Intelligence, and the Power Grid. My name is Andrea Berg and I am your host today. If you have any questions during this webinar, please feel free to use the chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. So to begin, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Peter. Peter?
Yeah, thank you. The agenda for today's webinar is on this slide. Brief introductions, then Paul Knightley, our senior weather risk manager, will get into more detail on weather extremes. Then Willy Zitterstein, solution engineer for the utility sector, will give more insight on what we see as the challenges for the utility sector. And then Nick Wilson, director of product management, will get more insight on grid and asset resilience, the role of technology, and how does DTM prepare. And then at the end, we'll round up with you and give you some insight on how to find further information on what we presented today. First of all, introductions. DTM in the utility sector in the UK. Here's an overview of, let's say, the TSOs and DSO environment within the UK utility sector. And actually, DTN has a working relationships and providing services to many of them in, let's say, energy supply companies, but also to a lot of the transmission and DSOs within the UK market. Paul.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Peter. So I lead the European weather room teams here at DTN, and I've been undertaking weather forecasting duties for the UK utilities market for since around about 2004. So a lot of experience in the sector, a lot of experience with the challenges that everyone faces with severe weather, but also, of course, in the changing climate that we have now. And you know, it's unequivocal that the global temperature is warming, and that will have impact as we go down the line, of course, to all areas of industry. Am I advancing the slide? Sorry, Peter, can you move ahead to the next slide, please? There.
I think you might present to yourself.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Let's move on. So let's just head on to the next slide. So, you know, the first area of climate change I want to sort of touch on in this brief session are the temperatures. And of course, we can expect with a warming climate that temperatures are going to become an issue. That doesn't mean to say that it's just suddenly going to become hot and then it's going to become hotter forevermore in the UK or elsewhere in the world. What it does mean, though, is that when we have hot periods of weather, which we've had in the past, they will become more intense. Now, there are different scenarios, and what you can see on the screen here are on the left-hand side of the sort of four images of the UK and Ireland. That's the observation of days which are termed as summer days, so the days of temperatures over 25 Celsius. Those are the sort of number of days per annum that we've experienced in the sort of 81 to 2000 timeframe. And with different of the climate targets that have been set in the various meetings in the last several years, the targets 1.5, 2 degree and 4 degree warming targets. Obviously, the 4 degree warming target is the most extreme, and what you can see there is a large increase in the number of what we call summer days over 25 Celsius, if some of the higher levels are reached there. The most of those will occur over England, but as you can see, even across Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, there is a tangible increase in those days as well. And I'm just checking my notes, and there are some compelling arguments because, as many of you will be aware, hot weather can cause issues for the transmission network. So, for example, the lines can sag as they expand in hotter weather. That increases the resistance and obviously decreases the capacity of the lines. Consumption tends to rise as well. Air conditioning is becoming more common. Many businesses, of course, already air conditioning, and we'll see an increase in that, I imagine, in residential areas as we go through the coming years, as well as people attempt to combat some of these hotter days and hotter nights as well. And then a study by a chap called Dr. Ian Stafel of Imperial College London showed that back in June 2017, for example, electricity demand rose by about 0.9% of the total amount, so about 300 megawatts for every degree rise in daytime temperature. So that's pretty significant. And finally, obviously power stations become less efficient because the cooling is less efficient in hot weather as well. And of course, transformers and other infrastructure like that all just suffer when it gets very hot. And I chose to also put an image of the BBC weather forecast the evening before the hot weather back in July 2022 there, where we first made the unfortunate milestone of reaching 40 Celsius in sort of recorded history across the UK there, which happened in several spots in Lincolnshire and also not far off that in London as well. If we take a look at some other impacts of climate change, I mean, temperature seems like an obvious one, but actually some of the more drastic impacts that perhaps are certainly more visible impacts, if you like, one of them is rainfall. And why can we expect more rainfall in a warm climate or a warmer climate? Well, in the physics of the atmosphere, the warmer the air is, the more potential it has to hold water vapor, which is the invisible gaseous form of water. And more water vapor is essentially more fuel, if you like, for the clouds to generate rainfall. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get more rain days or much wetter periods of time, but what it will mean, and already has meant because we've seen an increase in the winter rainfall, is that rainfall events themselves will bring more rainfall. So a typical rainfall event, say 30 years ago, 30 years in the future will bring rather more rainfall than it would have done 30 years ago, for example. And studies are already showing that the winter rainfall is increasing in the UK on a rather linear trend at the moment. So that brings a high risk of flooding, especially wintertime flooding from rivers, so large-scale flooding, a bit like the image depicts there, and we've seen actually this last winter a fair amount of that. You'll all be aware that, and obviously seen that there's been a lot of rainfall this last winter across the UK, but also adjacent parts of Northern Europe as well. And some other simulations suggest for some of the higher climate scenarios that somewhere between a 30 and 70% increase in short duration intense rainfall events as well. And potentially a 5-fold increase in rainfall events of, say, 30 millimeters over an hour. I'll stop there with a number of figures, but essentially what it means is there'll be more rain delivered per event in a warming climate than at present. However, conversely, and it may seem somewhat ironically, a warming climate due to the jet stream becoming rather more sluggish can lead us into blocked weather patterns, so getting stuck in a rut, a bit like we've seen again parts of this last winter into spring. We've been stuck in a rut of heavy rainfall events time after time and rather cool conditions at times. That can also have the opposite effect of getting us stuck into dry, warm or hot weather for long periods of time as well. So we expect heat waves and droughts to become more common as well, even though rainfall events and intense rainfall events will also become more common. And that just ultimately leads to a more difficult scenario for trying to prepare for these conditions, because one summer you may spend most of the summer dealing with hot weather and very dry conditions, and then the following summer we could be locked into an extremely wet pattern. Think back to the summer of 2007 in the UK, where we had some record-breaking rainfall events and some huge inland flooding around about mid to late July that year, in June and July that year. So these kind of locked and blocked, as I've termed them here, weather patterns will also become more numerous in the future. And finally, severe storms, wintertime storms. The insured losses from these in Northern Europe tend to be only second to US landfalling hurricanes for weather events. Overall, storminess around the world may decrease in temperate latitudes as the jet stream becomes broadly less intense as the poles warm faster than the tropics. But on the other hand, there are some simulations that show, and in fact, in reality, the North Atlantic isn't necessarily warming as quickly as the rest of the world, and that's because potentially the circulation of the North Atlantic is becoming disrupted by the increasing temperatures of the world, as well as some meltwater from Greenland. So that could locally increase the storminess for Northwest Europe in a worldwide decrease in sort of storminess from these mid-latitude weather events. So I want to leave it at that point there and hand back to Peter at this point in time. Peter.
Yeah, and handing over to Willy Zitterstein.
Yes, thank you. So this part of the webinar is about the challenges utilities are confronted with, especially the weather-related challenges. maybe you can move to the next slide. So there are some mega trend challenges, as we call it, and one of them is to identify vulnerable customers. That's a challenge. It might be that customers are impacted because they are connected to legacy infrastructure that's more vulnerable. So that's a way of how to depict whether customers are vulnerable to outages. It might also be that they have a higher dependency on power supply. It can even be critical. You can think about hospitals, etc., etc. And then there is like the weather risk. There might be areas in your operational area where there is just a higher weather risk. It can be coastal sites, for example. So then the second mega trend that we see is effective use of data. So more and more data becomes available, we always say, but how to use that data and how to apply it and turn it into actionable data, that is the challenge. Whenever it's connected to weather influence, weather expertise is needed, and also it's a challenge to make data available. We see that in projects that we conduct, that there is like a challenge to prepare the data and make it available for example, modeling. Another aspect of effective use of data is that you need to have the capabilities to work with the data. That's data science, artificial intelligence capabilities, and also the capacity is a challenge, what we see in the marketplace. Then a third challenge, more high-level challenge, is customer trust building. And for that, it is very important that customers nowadays, they want to be well informed. And in order to do so, you need to have a clear and accurate messaging. And in order to do that with regards to weather, it's good to have the right weather information in the messaging. With doing that, giving them the right messaging, it's a potential opportunity to avoid risks. And nowadays, people expect to be informed upfront an event, but also during the event and also after the event. It makes sense to inform people about what happened so that they are better aware of all the activities that are taken to avoid outages. Maybe you can go to the next slide. So when we look a little bit more into detail in terms of challenges, we see 4 categories of challenges, and one is connected to the integration of renewables. So there is an increase in production of renewables, and that's volatile. And that means that there are challenges coming to the distribution grid. It takes investments to create flexibility in the grid. Storage solutions are a part of that, for example, but it also takes time. When you look at integration of renewables, the yield is also depending on the weather influence, and that's where weather information, weather forecasting plays an important role. So then we have a component that is active demand management, as we call it. We see an increase in load spikes. It can be cooling during summer times, heat waves, etc. It's related to more extreme weather events. And there is an increased need of power anyway, because of decarbonization. And that increase can also mean that there are more critical uses of power. Yeah? So typically in society, people use more and more applications that use power, and we cannot do without it anymore. So it's getting more critical. And that needs an active demand management. Then the most obvious one out of the 4 is the extreme weather resilience. We see that there is, like Paul said, an increased weather risk, you could call it. And therefore, the grids need to improve the resilience. There is legacy infrastructure. To improve that and upgrade it will take time. And in the meantime, there is a need to perform maintenance in a more efficient way, where they can play a role there. It's also important to improve the restoration time and the preparation of the restoration. Also there, weather plays an important role. And as a last point here that should not be forgotten is the field crew safety. So sending out people, the field crew at the right time, not too early, makes it that they can work safe. And also during their work, it's good to know what weather hazards can happen. Then the last component here is the data analytics and forecasting. As said, more and more data becomes available. And how do you work with the data? That's the challenge. In order to connect it to weather events, there is weather expertise needed. Also the availability of the weather data. So to prepare the weather data, to start modeling, for example, that's not a straightforward exercise, we know. We've seen that in the marketplace. And then again, in order to work with it, you need to have the artificial intelligence, data science capabilities, but also the capacity. You need to have the right teams to work on it, to basically speed up and the development of predictive models. Then the latest development, what we see here is that we don't predict the weather anymore. Of course, we do predict the weather, but in terms of what we ship to the marketplace, it's more the impact of the weather. And the first step there, and maybe we can move to the next slide, Peter, because what we tend to do as being DTN is that we try to pivot the challenges that we see in the marketplace into opportunities. And the first step we take here is that we try to translate the weather data into the impact it has on your assets, on your operating regions, and on the safety of your field crew or the efficiency of your field crew. Next step there is that we translate the weather impact into parameters that are needed for your decision making. And that can be customers out, number of outages. So I would like to hand over now to Nick Wilson, Product Director, to tell more about how DTN can help you to cope with the challenges in the marketplace.
I appreciate the introduction, Willie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Wilson, DTN's Director of Product Management for Weather and Climate Intelligence. I've been working for over 20 years at the intersection of the weather and environment and utility operations. So I'm excited to share a little bit deeper insight into the role that artificial intelligence, machine learning, and analytics are playing in and around improving the resiliency and operational performance of electric utility distribution systems. Sorry, Andrea, do you have a question?
No, sorry, that was a mistake.
So first off, thinking about solutions that utilities can leverage weather and climate intelligence against. Let's talk about a focus first on extreme weather resilience. The challenge that utilities are facing is that extreme weather events, as Paul and Willie shared, are becoming more frequent and severe, leading to increased outages and disruptions across your grid system. The solution is working with the increasingly amount of data that's available across your network to build a resilient infrastructure in order to withstand these events and minimize the downtime and maintain reliable service for your customers. As an example, you can take historic as well as current asset health and condition data and benchmark that relative to past weather events and trends to identify any correlations that exist between increased amounts of failure relative to the weather conditions and environment that those assets have been exposed toward. Over time, you'll be able to start recognizing underperforming assets so that you can accordingly prioritize your capital expenditure and planning budgets. A second challenge, and the UK has certainly been at the forefront globally as far as transitioning to a green powered grid, is the integration of renewable energy. Traditional energy sources are becoming more expensive relative to renewables and can be volatile in their prices, leading to unexpected consequences in long-term planning for utilities. By integrating more renewables, such as solar and wind, it helps diversify the energy mix and reduces the reliance on expensive fuels as described. This ultimately is going to lower generation costs and bring benefits to the customers across the UK market. Not only does it save them money, but it's also helping the utilities reach and exceed their sustainability goals, adhere to increasing regulation across the market, and enhance your image as an environmentally responsible utility. With renewable energy integration, a lot of predictive analytics in and around the behavior of networks of renewable energy power generation sources. So for example, it's quite easy to predict the power generation potential of a single wind turbine. However, if you bring those together into a complex farm or plant system, there's a number of intricate factors that interplay between one another, such as wake effects, the considerations of maintenance activities, and other environmental impacts, such as cutout of the turbines at high wind speeds. Next, in around demand management, peak weather events, whether it's extreme heat or on the opposite end of the spectrum, extreme cold, put a strain on the grid. This helps contribute to additional outages, especially on the generation side, and the need for expensive emergency generation. By better managing customer demand, such as encouraging off-peak use of appliances on hot days, we can reduce the strain on the system. So there's a lot of opportunity with weather intelligence and modeling to better characterize the demand side generation, such as rooftop solar. There's other data sources and influences related to EV, battery storage and charging of vehicles. And this all connects together to help utilities better manage the intricate balance between generation as well as demand. There's, this not only helps prevent outages, but it helps utility in cost optimization and customers through strategies like time of use pricing. Lastly, in general, there's a number of different applications for data analytics and forecasting. Without good data, it's difficult to make informed decisions and proactively manage resources as a utility. By nature, utilities have staffing levels that are optimal for the majority of their operations in blue sky days. When there are significant weather events and impacts, you need to seek assistance from neighboring utilities or bring in external contractors in order to achieve estimated times of restoration that are in line with your customer expectations as well as the regulations in place. The benefits of integrating more data across your organization is you can optimize the generation dispatch and plan ahead for potential issues, maximize efficiency and minimize the reliance on weather-dependent sources when needed, and additionally, identify predictive maintenance and outage forecasting to help prevent otherwise necessary service disruptions on the maintenance side and restore service as quickly as possible when there's environmental impacts that cause outages across the above ground system especially. Let's now talk a little bit deeper into some of the applications that I introduced in the previous slide. DTN's forecast system combines global weather models with machine learning to create highly accurate forecasts no matter where you are in the world. Unlike traditional weather models, DTN's forecasts are lightning fast and provide critical insights for timely decision making. This removes the limitations of traditional model resolution and optimizes the forecasts for any specific location so that we can fit the appropriate forecast and analytics with the use case and the problems that we're attempting to solve. In regards to resilience benchmarking, DTN goes beyond basic weather prediction and offering different types of data sets that can be the foundational element of resiliency benchmarking to identify vulnerable spots across your grid. This also allows you as a utility to better prioritize inspections and maintenance based on lightning risks, wind damage, and asset health. On the front of outage prediction, we can leverage historical outage data that may be aggregated together in an outage management system or an ADMS, and combine that with weather and grid health information to predict outages up to 7 days in the future. This empowers utilities, as described earlier, to mobilize resources in advance of those storms so that they can be pre-positioned to restore service as quickly as possible in order to minimize impact and achieve those faster restoration times to start generating revenue once again, improve the levels of customer satisfaction, and appease your regulators. In regards to load forecasting, DTN's artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities go beyond just basic trends. And our data can help utilities uncover hidden patterns in complex data sets to predict electricity demand. There's a number of new data sources that machine learning are making more easier than ever to incorporate into load and balancing oriented models. For example, data sources like weather, social media, customer demographics can all be incorporated seamlessly in ways that were not well understood in advanced artificial intelligence models now today. This allows for real-time adaptation for utilities to make informed decisions about resource allocation, as well as optimizing grid operations. So putting this into context, DTN really prides itself in differentiating with our artificial intelligence and machine learning powered solutions to provide superior weather insights that can enable proactive grid management, outage prediction, and intelligent load forecasting. This empowers utilities to make data-driven decisions that ensure grid resilience and customer satisfaction. And that's more important than ever because there's so much turnover in the industry. Those that have innate knowledge of their local service territory, the local climatology and weather patterns, there's more expansion across organizations as far as roles and responsibilities and the breadth of accountability. So having data-driven platforms that the utility across its entire operational holistic paradigm can take standardized, repeatable, and trustworthy decisions against is increasingly important. Briefly, I want to share a little bit more detail about the solutions that DTN provides specific for utilities. As a starting foundational element, we have a suite of data as well as APIs in order to serve and deliver that data in any way, shape, or form that you would want to integrate that across your enterprise systems. We have a weather conditions API, which provides our worldwide global forecast system, current condition information, as well as historical forecast data for any grid or point across the world. We also then have an observation API, which provides near real-time and historical weather station observations. Combined together, each of those data sets can be extremely useful for the training of artificial intelligence models, as well as using that data then operationally once you've developed a solution that achieves the problems that you're trying to solve, so that you have consistency between how those models are trained and how they're operationalized across your organization. We also have more general oriented solutions such as agency bulletin APIs, which can bring in alerts and warnings from the Met Office in the UK. Map Tile API, which provides visualization data layers that can be embedded across your enterprise systems. Lightning API, which can help correlate assets to lightning challenges for validation of faults and momentary outages, as well as used over time to benchmark the performance of different circuits in order to prioritize the investment in any protection equipment and technologies. Lastly, DTN is a trusted partner with Esri. So we have a full range of ArcGIS data service capabilities, such as weather radar, lightning, and surface observations and analysis that can be directly integrated if you're leveraging any of their ArcGIS platform tools. On the weather intelligence front, DTN has a global weather intelligence platform, Weather Sentry Online, which provides a central application for managing the observations, forecasts, alerts, and actionable intelligence relative to your assets and areas of your operating network. Paul and his team do a great job of delivering daily risk communication reports that can be customized and tailored to your specific service regions of operation to provide the expected impact of forecasted environmental hazards and putting them into context of the levels of severity that are relevant for your utility operations. We can also couple that with what we call risk communicator, where our expert meteorologists provide even deeper levels of insights, as well as contribution to your emergency preparedness plans in order to prepare your business to respond and recover from significant weather events. Lastly, DTN is a global leader in outage prediction. We've now implemented outage prediction systems for over 20 operating companies that serve more than 30 million customers globally. Our storm impact analytics solution has been in market since 2017. It provides outage prediction, leveraging that historic outage management system data, combining it with our historic weather forecasts, your asset information, vegetation data sets, if available, land use and topographical information, asset health data can all be incorporated into the artificial intelligence machine learning prediction models to develop very advanced forecasts for outages or incidents, damage spots across the grid, or customers affected. Combined, these insights can help utilities better prepare and respond effectively to storms. We also have a really interesting module inside of Storm Impact Analytics called Similar Events. One of the first things as an emergency preparedness manager you think about ahead of a significant weather event is what historic storm that impacted my service region is this forecasted event most similar?
I think we lost Nick
Yeah.
for the end of his presentation, so I'm going to turn this over to you, Peter.
Yeah. Okay. Rounding up, we've given you a brief insight from, let's say, weather extremes through the challenges we see in the utility sector, and then last presenter Nick Wilson was presenting on the topics he just shared along the slides he presented on this WebEx webinar. What we will do is we will get in touch with you. We will get back to you to discuss, let's say, the applicability or the value this could bring to your organization, to your utility organization, to your operation. Go into more details about, let's say, the things we are offering and the things we are bringing new to the UK utility market. And based on that, our team, our commercial team will reach out to you with the support from our technical and solutions team in order to, let's say, to check with you where you are, what value, what additional value you could get from DTN in helping you to be more proactive and be aware of the things ahead caused by whatever severe weather situation in the near future. And looking forward to reconnect to all of you after this webinar. Thank you for attending. And to all participants and people that subscribe to the webinar, we will share with you an ebook on the challenges you see in operations in the utility sector in the UK, and we'll share it with you via email as well as a recording of this webinar and share it with you in an email as well. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll be in touch with you soon. Thank you very much.